Audio recording for this meeting has begun.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please, we're asking that you pose any questions that you may have in the chat box today as we're going along, and then mute your lines for the entire duration of the webinar. We'll address all questions from the chat entered in the chat box at the end if time allows. Evaluations will be sent out following the webinar. There will be an opportunity to ask additional questions about today's webinar in there as well. We have two speakers today. Isaac Mallory is the Director of Sales and Business Development for HR Performance Solutions. He has been working in the medical and financial industries for over a decade and has most recently been deeply entrenched in human resources. He's taught thousands of HR professionals and executives about compensation, performance management, and HR analytics, and how these tools can help them run more effective and happier teams and organizations. Isaac is an advocate of HR analytics, especially among small to medium-sized enterprises. He believes massive benefits can come to those organizations when their HR departments make data-based decisions. Our second speaker is Jennifer Dickey. As an experienced human resources professional, Jennifer has over 17 years experience working for organizations in the financial and health industry with a focus on business strategy, employee engagement, compensation philosophies, training and development, and so much more. Jennifer is an HR consultant and speaker for HR Performance Solutions, promoting how to create a culture of continuous opportunity and helping people to be inspired to innovate and make an impact on organizations' most valuable asset, its people. So with that, I'll let our presenters take over and get started. Thank you for coming.
Hey everybody, great to be with you. My name is Isaac Mallory, and I'm here with my wonderful colleague Jennifer Dickey.
Hello, and thanks for that awesome introduction. When you hear it from somebody else, I sound pretty amazing.
Jennifer, you are amazing. You're doing great. You're doing great. So we are going to, you should be able to see our screen right now being shared out. And what we'll do is I'm going to share a little bit about our organization just so that you're familiar with a little bit of who we are. We'll take about 30 seconds to do that and then dive right into the subject today about how do we create sticky employees. So as you can see on the screen, our firm focuses really in two spaces. We're an HR consulting firm out of Metro Detroit. And we really focus on performance management. We have a performance management application which helps organizations to really fine-tune and optimize and get the most out of their performance management process. We also work in the compensation space. And so what we do is we help companies figure out how much they should be paying their employees, because pay is an important part of an employee's experience. And those numbers are sometimes hard to get right. And so that's our space. That's our background. We work with over 1,600 organizations and at any given time to help in these two areas. So there's just a little bit about us. I'm going to click to the next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about the sticky employee. So one of the things that's happening right now in the job market is that employees are coming and going at a much faster pace than they have historically. So speaking of historically, I'm going to click to the next slide, and I want you to, this is perhaps the most important slide on the deck.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow, indeed, Jennifer.
Yes, I am looking fabulous on that slide.
Great hair, great hair. So these are pictures from when we were a bit younger. Jennifer's was taken in 1992.
That's when Rave number 4 was incredibly popular for all of you listening.
I did not use Rave number 4, but hats off to you who did. And so the reason that we're showing this slide is that a lot has changed in the marketplace since these pictures were taken. We're going to talk about a lot of things that are current and try to bring you up to speed as to what's current, because again, the landscape has changed and we have to be able to change with it. So we'll turn over a little bit of the time to Jennifer and talk about the sticky employees and how do we know if employees are engaged in the most important things.
Absolutely. So we all have employees, right? When we expect them to come to work each and every day and make a positive impact and help us strengthen our workplace. And so conversely, as an organization, we need to be doing the same for them. We need to support their needs, we need to encourage their progress, and we need to make sure that they're compensated accordingly, right? Because employees have needs as well. That leads to that opening question that we see on the screen today. How do you know if your employees are engaged in the things that matter most? You hear so much about engagement, but to take it a step further, how should employees be engaged? What are those things that matter most? You know that if you have an organization with highly engaged employees, they're going to be and outperform companies that are more productive, that are more profitable. They're going to see decreases in levels of turnover, right? So this is all the things that we're looking for. We need to have our organization look like that. Throughout decades of working with various organizations, we experience these similar questions and these similar thoughts. We've also experienced a lot of assumptions from executives, HR professionals, and even employees about what am I supposed to be engaged in? Why am I here? So presentations like you'll see today, they're meant to help leaders really move beyond assumptions and implement practices that will contribute to healthier workplaces, better results, engaged employees that will stick with your organization. So what are we worried about? We're worried about our top performers, right? Let's take a look at our top performers. And we want to look at them and we want to make them sticky because they have choices. 35% of employees are so unsatisfied with their salary that they're going to leave to get a pay increase. What about individuals that you hire that you think, you know what, I did it right. I had the crystal ball. I hired the perfect employee and they're going to be so successful. This is great. But what we're seeing is in a study of over 1,000 workers, 31% reported having quit a job within their first 6 months. How devastating. This has happened to me and this has happened to countless organizations. You spend thousands and thousands of dollars onboarding, training, getting them acclimated to only find out that they're leaving. Well, why are they leaving? What are we missing? And take a look at Gallup's real unemployment metric. That takes into account those who are unemployed, underemployed, or who have stopped seeking employment. That sits at 7.9%. Where is unemployment sitting right now for
Wyoming? You guys are much lower than that. So on a statewide level.
Yeah, so whether you're taking more consideration into Gallup or the Department of Labor's unemployment metric, it's pretty obvious. You know, the American workforce, your top performers, they have choices. That puts so much pressure on all of us to now sit back and go, okay, what do I need to do different? How do I compete like talent like I've never done before? And we need to be able to understand this so that we can implement strategies that'll support an engaging employee experience and help our employees be successful in attracting and retaining talent. So what do we want to talk about today? Let's talk about how to develop our top performers. Let's figure out who these individuals are so we can identify them. And then let's come up with a plan so that we can engage these individuals, okay? Oh, goals. So goals are incredibly important. Does everybody remember goals, right? Every organization sits down at the end of the year and they develop different business strategies. Well, what happens after that? Does it trickle down to your employees? Take a look at what Gallup is telling us. Gallup's telling us that only 50% of employees know what's expected of them at work. But we all know that if we have goals, if our employees have goals, they're going to provide that direction. They're going to set and measure the success of organizations. So let's start here. Let's start with goals. Let's start with performance management cultures. If we can provide our employees with goals, we can help to identify what those employees should be engaged in, right? Those things that matter most. Employees are looking for this. And it doesn't do enough to just assign goals. You really have to take it a step further. According to an HR magazine, engaged employees, they perform 20% better and they're 87% less likely to leave an organization.
So that's a really big number. Now, let me ask you what you think accounts for up to 70% of an employee's engagement level. This is another really big number. And we are an intimate enough group today that we can probably answer some questions in the chat module as well. So if you have questions and comments, feel free to enter those in there and we'll kind of speak to those as we go, or at least we'll try to. All right, so think for a second. Engagement level is one of these kind of soft, fuzzy feeling type of words, but it really actually, in academia, it actually has a very specific meaning. And like Jennifer alluded to, the research around it shows that employees who have an increased engagement level, they're more likely to be retained. They're more likely to stay with the organization. And so what is it that accounts for 70% of the engagement level? Well, it's actually the manager. Right? The manager accounts for that manager-employee relationship accounts for 70% of the engagement level. So some of the things that we advocate that organizations do are train managers to be able to build these strong relationships with their employees. And so that includes leading and coaching employees to success and, like Jennifer mentioned, making sure that employees' goals are aligned with the outcomes that the organization is looking for.
So how do you identify if that's actually happening? A lot of us probably are in these positions where we say, you know what, going forward, I'm going to make sure that our employees have goals. And to take it a step further, I'm going to make sure that those goals actually contribute to the success of the business. But throughout the year, you have no idea on whether that's actually happening, whether managers and employees are actually executing on this. Well, in order to be able to do that, let's start tracking this. Let's start using data, right? Here's a good example of how you can do that. If you can identify what all of the business strategies are in the organization, you would plot those out. So say on the left-hand side of the screen, we see strategy definitions, and that top one with a box around it says develop 10 new strategic partnerships. Okay, perfect. So now let's identify how many goals employees have that are actually linked to helping this strategic initiative be successful. So if you go across, you can see we've got 35 goals that are going to help this specific strategy move in a positive direction. But if you go over one column further, you can see that out of that 35, only 28 have actually been started. Go a column over, 5 are moving, so there's some movement, there's some progress, and only 2 have been completed. So having information like this, putting data like this together will help you throughout the year, because you don't just want to implement a goal strategy and not be able to monitor its performance. I'm not advocating let's all be babysitters on these things, but you do have to monitor it so that you can ensure it's going to be successful and you can stop and make some decisions or have some conversations where conversations need to be had. What department isn't aligning goals to strategy? What department maybe aligned a goal to strategy, but they're not making any movement on it? Maybe they're not coaching and developing their employees to check in on these goals. So you want to be able to have information like this at your tip of your finger so that you can make quick decisions and have quick conversations. Let's talk about engagement. How does engagement correlate with performance? A lot of us out there probably have a lot of isolated data or a lot of isolated metrics. If you look on the right-hand side of your screen, there's 2 bar graphs, one being engagement levels of a different division or maybe a department, and right next to it we have performance scores by employee of a department or division. Great data, great metrics, but if you use them in an isolated way, it makes it very difficult to identify what might be going on with top performers. If the only thing that you're evaluating top performers on is performance, then perfect. But are those top performers engaged? Are they engaged in the things that matter most? When you correlate data, it will look something like the graph that you see on the left-hand side. That will then allow you to, again, identify, okay, do I have top performers and are they engaged in those things that matter most? Or do I need to start having conversations? Do we need to sit down and identify, are those top performers engaged? Are they motivated? Are they being coached and developed by their managers? One individual that lies as a red flag to me, that would be Danielle. Look at Danielle. Her performance level, 4.5 out of 5. She's a top performer to me. But then take a look at the left-hand side. Her engagement level is a 4 out of 12. What are some things that might be going on with Danielle? Is there a problem with the team? Problem with the manager? Has she outgrown her position and feel like, okay, what's next for me? Is there something going on with her compensation? Does she feel like pay is a distraction, or that she's competitively getting paid according to market? These are things where you can quickly identify, okay, we have an issue. Let's stop. Let's have some conversations, and let's make sure that we can retain our top talent. We can make those employees sticky employees within the organization. So, top performers. How do you find those individuals? One way that you can do that is you can plot out the information as you see fit by utilizing the different data points that you have. We all have data, right? Whether it's in your payroll system, whether you have a recruiting system, whether you have a performance management system, we have data. So utilize that data and create a top performer profile. An example of this looks simply like the one you see on your screen. Here we have Sarah. She's a barista. Some things in terms of her core competencies and experience that make her successful in her role. Some benchmark skills, goals that were assigned to her. Her compa ratio, and we'll talk more about that, but the compa ratio communicates to us as an organization and to that employee where they are in their grade level, their salary grade level, her most recent performance score, and her engagement level. What you want to do is, once you plot this information out and you've created a top performer profile, identify areas that may be a red flag as you review this data. One thing that stood out to me on Sarah are her goals. Attendance. Yep, that's important. Sarah has to show up every single day. But you know what? So does everybody else. I look at attendance as a basic expectation. When we think of goals, think back to what are those things that are aligned directly with business strategies? What are those things that are going to help motivate and engage employees in the things that matter most? Having attendance as a goal for Sarah isn't going to help support Sarah feeling like a top performer in your organization, right? Because everybody else has that same expectation. It's a basic expectation. So this is a great opportunity for you to review goals assigned, reevaluate, and then reassess goals that'll help drive your business and help keep her engaged in those things that matter most.
So when we're talking about engagement levels, we work in a number of different industries, and that has different meanings in different industries. One type of engagement level has to do kind of with physician burnout, right? In the medical community, we have some major issues with physician burnout, and so think of engagement levels on a continuum. You may have an administrative assistant or somebody at the front desk who's disengaged at work, and that means that she's showing up a little bit late, or she's not being as patient with patients as she should be. You may also have physicians where a physician has this burnout from their engagement levels. and that has a very different consequence. And so there's some interesting things being done with physician burnout levels. If that's something that's of interest to you at a larger scale, reach out to me via LinkedIn, and we can put you in touch with some organizations that are doing some really powerful things with system-wide physician burnout needs. So Jennifer's talked a lot about data, and data is appropriate for pretty much any organization, and we recognize that in the medical community, we're talking about major systems, major hospital systems, for example, and goals and data have a place there. And we also have a number of primary care practitioners, PCPs, who will have an office of 2 or 3 individuals. And so these goals play a different role at different types of organizations. I just want to acknowledge that. Now, one thing that is consistent across any organization is this concept of giving honest and candid feedback. Your millennial employees want twice as much feedback as your other employees. Yet historically, we're not always really great at giving feedback. One of the reasons for that is that many people feel like if I give honest and candid feedback, it's going to demotivate my employees. We've all had an experience where we've been we've gotten the short end of the stick, so to speak, when it comes to feedback. And someone gives us feedback, they do it in a harsh way, and it leads to a decrease in engagement levels. And this is an issue in any industry, and the healthcare industry is no exception. One of the things that needs to happen across all industries is that we need to get better at giving honest and candid feedback.
Yeah, don't take the advice of how your mother gives you specific feedback. It should be very different.
It should be a little different sometimes, depending on your mother.
Yeah.
Depending on your mother. So, the main idea, though, is that honest and candid feedback can be given in 2 different ways. It can be given, like Jennifer alluded to, in a harsh way that maybe a parent would give when they're feeling short of patience. It could also be given in a very supportive way, right? And when honest and candid feedback is given in a supportive way, it has a different feel. And so it's experienced differently by these employees. And that actually leads to an increase in performance and an increase in employee resilience. And these are the types of things that help you to have a sticky employee, an employee who wants to stick around. So that may take some coaching at your office or at your clinic or in your hospital system. But when that is gotten right, that creates a totally different culture, which is worth all of the effort that it takes to do that. So keep that in mind, that when feedback is being given, it should be kept human. It should be honest and done in a supportive way. For example, one great way to do that is to start a conversation with an employee where there's real trust, and you start the conversation by saying something to the effect of, I see so much potential in you. You're doing such a great job in these areas. One thing I've noticed that is a little inconsistent with your performance is this area, right? Tell me what you're thinking in that space, and then you get the employee to kind of speak to it. But it's done in a supportive way. It's done from the perspective of, you're a great employee, and we want to make you even better. That has a totally different tone than, hey, you screwed up, and now a patient yelled at me.
Right.
So something to keep in mind. That's a really critical component of having a sticky employee workplace. All right, so just to recap a couple things that we've covered. We've talked about knowing how many people have in goals, correlating those strategies, correlating the goals to the strategies that the organization has in place, and last but not least, put processes in place that keep things human, so to keep the conversations human. That is going to take some coaching many times from an experienced HR professional. Okay, let's talk about your top performers for a second here. And before we do that, we're going to jump into a little video about NASCAR. So this is going to play out of your speakers of your computer, so I want you to turn those down a little bit for me. It's NASCAR, so it's very loud. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. That happened really fast. I hope you could hear the sound on that. So the sound was really loud, and in about 8 seconds, this individual had their tires changed and they gassed up. They got gassed. So really fast. So now we're going to put that on the side. We're going to put that to the side. We're going to come back to that just in just a moment before we talk about top performers here, or while we talk about top performers. So I'm going to introduce you to a couple of people here. Over on the left, you see Justo Thomas. And Justo Thomas works at a very famous restaurant in New York City called Le Benedrin. And Justo fillets fish for a living. Okay, does that sound good, Jennifer?
It does.
Jennifer's told me that she likes fillet of fish at McDonald's.
I do. It's the only thing I'll eat at McDonald's.
Okay, there you go. Well, Justo does not work at McDonald's. He works at these fancy restaurants filleting fish. Now, the reason that we point out Justo is because he's a little bit of a celebrity in the culinary circle. So Justo can fillet 1,000 pounds of fish in a single day. When Justo takes a day off of work, his boss has to call in 3 other employees to do the work of Justo. So here's the point. Your top performers can produce more. Make sure you know who those top performers are. Okay? Now, Serena Williams is right there in the center. She is a female tennis player. She is the only individual to have won 6 singles tournaments in 6 singles titles in Grand Slam tournaments. To put it in perspective, she is one of 5,000 female professional tennis players. About 50% of those female tennis professional players have never, ever earned a penny on the professional circuit, right? So Serena's in a class of her own. Now, back to our NASCAR example. This is Kyle Busch's pit crew. They were once looked at as being the best pit crew. I don't think that's the case right now, but we have some interesting data about them. So on this 6-man pit crew team, they have they can do about 70 plus maneuvers in about 12 seconds. If you replace one of those individuals, those top performers, if you replace a top performer with an average performer, then that time doubles to 24 seconds. If you replace 2 of those top performers with average performers, you're going to end up with about a 30-second pit stop. So again, the point, your top performers allow you to do more. So it's good to know who they are, and it's good to make sure that those individuals are taken care of and that they understand their goals and they're working towards things. So I'm going to give you another example here. This is an example of a major financial institution. This is by Burson by Deloitte. It's research out of their firm. Some of you are familiar with Burson by Deloitte. What they found was that there was a bank that hired the same way every time they hired one of their salespeople. They went to the very best universities, they found the smartest people in their classes, and then they made sure those people had impeccable references. Now, what they also found was that their top performers had these 3 things in common. So they found that even though they had the same hiring practices, there was a lot of discrepancy in what results those salespeople got. The top salespeople had these 3 things in common. They had typo-free resumes, they had home or auto sales experience, and they had a college degree. It didn't matter where the degree was from, but they had one, and it didn't really matter how well they did. So they had a question. Are we going to hire based on our historical hiring processes, or are we going to hire based on these new processes? This organization changed their hiring practices, and in 6 months they had earned an additional $4 million in revenue. So we're trying to make the point that if you know who your top performers are, and if you understand them, then all of a sudden you have a better ability to, number 1, retain them, and then number 2, bring in more people just like them. So it's worth it to really understand your top performers. So again, just to reiterate, find your top talent, recognize them, point out who they are, let them know that they're valued, and then build retention practices for the top talent. And that may mean giving them additional opportunities. It may mean giving them different leniency in their role. It may mean an increase in pay, right? So find some way to retain that top talent. Now, we're going to jump over to a conversation about compensation. And to do that, I'm going to ask a quick question. So in your minds, or put it in the chat for us here, is hiring more difficult today than it was 10 years ago? All right, let's see. Looks like I may not be able to see your chat responses. So Jennifer, let's go to you.
My answer would be heck yes.
Heck yes.
Yep.
Okay, we're getting a heck yes from Jennifer.
Yep.
I bet you most agree with Jennifer there. Jennifer, what about 5 years ago?
Absolutely, even
Okay.
5 years ago.
What about 2?
Even 2 years ago. Absolutely.
Okay. So
Especially nurses
you got it.
and home care workers.
Yep. Home health. Yep.
Yep.
So real shortage in individuals that are out there right now. I want to show you something about employees' pay, because pay is a major reason employees stay with an organization. Now, this is a survey. I'm going to reveal it little piece by little piece. People have misperceptions about their pay. Okay, that's the premise of this slide. The people that you're looking at in this little portion of the slide, these are people that are paid below market, and 83% of them say, yeah, we agree, we're paid below market. There's a chunk, though. There's a small chunk that say that we're paid at or above market. Okay, so the point I'm going to make here is that there is a misperception. It's not always about the dollars. Sometimes compensation is about the messaging, because look at this. We have employees who are paid at market, and 64% of them think they're paid below. Only 30% think that they're paid at market, okay? And a little percent think they're above. All right, what about the people who are paid above market? All right, so people who are above market, only 21% of them think that they're paid above market. A whopping 35% believe that they are paid below market. Okay, so this is really interesting because your top performers, in some research that's out there, top performers show that the number one reason that they leave is for pay. Okay, that's your top performers. They leave because they don't feel their pay is competitive. So the point I want to drive home is that if you want to retain your employees, you do need to pay them fairly. You do need to have competitive wages and find a way to make that work. You also have to message correctly about how you're paying your employees. Okay, so that may come down to things like talking about total compensation for their employees and those types of things. But just keep in mind that messaging about pay is important when it comes to retaining employees. Okay, so we're going to really briefly talk about what makes a competitive salary. There are a number of different components. One is location. Okay, so the geographical place where you are is going to determine that. New York City, downtown New York City pays more than we pay in Metro Detroit, and Metro Detroit typically pays more than most locations in Wyoming, right? And so location makes a difference. So does size of the organization. Larger hospital systems will probably naturally pay a little bit more than a 3-person clinic or 3-person primary care facility. Same with availability of specific skills, okay? We see this most frequently in IT positions. And so if you have a hospital that has IT positions, you're going to note that sometimes you have to pay a little bit more when you're trying to get specific programming skills that may not be readily available in the marketplace. Same with unemployment. So let's talk about unemployment just for a minute here. Wyoming unemployment rate as of December was 4.2%, okay? That is pretty low. Now, we're going to talk for just a couple of minutes that number is going to probably go down a little bit. But at some point, the unemployment level, really, you're going to be working, you're going to have people left who are really may not have the skills to be employed. And so when it gets too low, different strategies need to be rolled out there. I'm going to offer a couple of thoughts. This works well in the financial institutions. We have some financial institutions that are in rural locations, right? So kids grow up there and then they move away. They want to live near the city. That's exciting to them, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen some success with organizations that keep tabs on people who have moved away, who may be looking for an excuse to come home, right? And so that may be a strategy that you consider, is that figuring out who's moved away that may still love the community, they still have roots here, they may want to come back. Because if you can find the right person who wants to live in your space and you know, maybe they have a good attitude and they're the type of a person that you want to have around, maybe you need to be actively recruiting some of these individuals to come back home, to be close to mom and dad and raise your kids in the town you grew up in. And so that may be one way for you to re-attract talent in a competitive landscape. We just read some reports about unemployment rates being really low in your folks' part of the country. They couldn't find prison guards. And so they're recruiting prison guards from other parts of, from other states, right? They're bringing talent in. And so you may need to find that you're getting a little creative about what you're doing to bring in talent, okay? Now, a couple of other things that determine salaries. One is replacement costs. We won't get too much into that, but another is macro trends. We'll talk about this just briefly. So we've mentioned that recruiting talent and hiring talent is harder now than it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That's in part because of major population changes. The need for workers is increasing, and the number of workers just is not keeping pace with it. So you're going to see over the next 18, 20 years that it's going to continue to be really difficult to hire people. So you need to make sure that you have these sticky employees, and you also need to get good at attracting the right employees. I'm going to show you one more major trend, and this has not come to Michigan, this has not come to Wyoming, but there are states that are restricting us from asking certain questions that we would typically ask during an interview. One of those questions is, how much did you make at your last location? And then we use that to kind of lure people in and pay a little bit more and get them over to work with us. Well, you're seeing it on the coasts a little bit, and then in a few select cities, that their laws are being passed so that question can no longer be asked. Now, in Wyoming and in Michigan, those laws are going to be a little bit slower to get to us, but we anticipate that they will eventually get to us and that we won't be able to ask that type of data. That's going to make it even more difficult for us to hire in new individuals because we're not going to be able to have some of that data that we've historically had. So how do you combat these and any other challenges that are out there? It's pretty simple. It's gather some data. Jennifer has a great technique for gathering data from exit interviews. I'll invite her to speak to that just for a moment here and share some thoughts about how you can begin to gather some of that data.
Right. So when employees leave, especially if you have top performers that are leaving, you want to make sure that you're capturing the why behind it, right? So maybe your organization is doing exit surveys, and if you're not, I highly recommend it so that you can start with data. But usually what we've seen in working with organizations, your top performers, they keep it very safe in terms of how they fill out an exit survey. And they do this because your top performers, they're smart. They know the importance of establishing and maintaining relationships, maintaining networks in the event, you know what if it doesn't work out and I want to come back? So when completing an exit survey, what they normally will identify as the top reason that they're leaving your organization is because maybe it's to enhance their career or just a new career opportunity. However, it's pretty difficult, and you're unable to identify, well, I wonder if it had anything to do with comp. They didn't mention anything, and they probably won't because comp is very sensitive. And if they start to identify comp as the reason that they're leaving, they're afraid that it's going to burn that bridge. And again, they want to maintain that relationship. So what we've recommended for organizations is when you're asking, what's the top reason that you are leaving, or what's the top reason that maybe you started looking for a new opportunity, then have a follow-up question to that. Have a follow-up question to their top reason for leaving, and have that question worded in such a way that it identifies something to do with comp. So maybe you say, with your new position, what percentage of increase will you see in your pay? If you add something like that, you can start collecting data. If you have top performers that are going to another organization and doing the same exact thing that they were doing at your organization and identifying that, yep, I'm moving, I'm getting a new job, the same thing, but I'm going to see a 10% increase, or I'm going to see a 20% increase in my pay. That way you'll have that data and you can start to make a case of, you know what, pay seems to be a distraction in my organization. How do I eliminate that distraction? And if it is a distraction, if I'm losing my top talent to other organizations because of pay, at least I have some data in my pocket to where I can go back to my C-suite or I can go back to our CEO and say, here's the data to support that we need to reevaluate pay. We need to come up with better strategies so that we can be a competitive player within this space.
Great. Really great suggestion. So now we're going to ask a question, and you have your little chat function down below. You can answer this question for us. So how competitive do you feel salaries are at your organization? Okay, is it too high? Are they just right? Too low? Or I'm not sure, but I sure wish I knew. Okay, so those are your 4 options. And Jennifer, we see a few people getting ready to type in some things here. Okay, just right. Okay, seriously low. Marianne says seriously low. Okay, great. We hear that. We hear that.
Yeah, don't send me a resume application for seriously low. If you're too high, then let me know.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Sign it up.
Yep. So Kristen's saying it depends on the position. Great. So there's variation. And Stephanie's weighing in at too low. So that's pretty typical with what we see. Honestly, that's pretty typical. We see some that are just right, some that are just low, and some that are kind of in between. And then there's almost never does somebody say, we're too high. That just almost never happens. So great. You guys are pretty typical. I love it. So I'm going to ask you this. Let me see, Marianne and Stephanie, I'm going to ask you this. Do your bosses agree with you?
So if you went to your CEO and said, you know what, our pay is too low, would they agree, or would they say, nope, our pay is just right?
Great. Okay. So Stephanie's saying, okay, so Marianne's saying some yes. Great. And Stephanie's saying yes, but they feel somewhat powerless to fix it. Great. Okay. Perfect. We're going to speak a little bit to that as we go. Fantastic. Thanks for sharing, guys. So again, the way you resolve this is getting data. So sometimes bosses and sometimes HR doesn't see the same way as a CEO or a president or the proprietor of an organization, depending on whether you're in a privately held clinic or office, right? And so data helps to bridge the gap. We're going to give a quick example here of innovative pay practices, just kind of to pepper this in for you as we flesh out some of the things that we've just talked about. So again, this is going to play out of your speakers, and here we go. Okay, there you go. So, Jennifer, what do you think?
Yeah, so this idea, we would suggest you go back and propose this idea in your organization.
Wait, no, don't do that.
No, we definitely don't recommend that you do this.
Yeah.
Not at all. So this pay practice or this innovative strategy that Dan Price established and executed at Gravity Payments, it's definitely an innovative pay practice, right? However, it's not something that we would recommend. But why we have this on here is the why behind why he did this. He was in conversations with various employees, and what he found out in talking to them is that they were really struggling with their personal finances because they felt that they weren't getting paid enough in order to live adequately, just to have housing, to be able to feed their kids, things like that. So what he identified as pay became a distraction within his organization. His top performers were then struggling because of this distraction to come in on a day-to-day basis and be engaged in those things that mattered most to help him drive a successful business. So he wanted to eliminate that distraction so that his employees could come in and focus on the business, focus on helping him to drive a successful organization. So again, he just wanted to eliminate that pay distraction, which he did. And if you check in now, his company is still very successful. There was some fallout because of this. However, he struggled. Again, we don't recommend this, but we do recommend finding out, is pay a distraction in your organization? Is this something that employees are so consumed with that they're having a difficult time being successful and being engaged in what they should be engaged in at work?
Yep. So here's a little bit of the results from this experiment that this organization did. As you can see, before the wage was raised.
Or the rage.
The rage was raised. Yes, thank you. I'm a trained professional. So before the wages were raised, the average happiness level was kind of low, and then they started to seem to do things to listen to employees, and there was this spike of happiness, right? This is measuring the happiness levels of their employees, and that was maintained for a number of months, and then it normalized a little bit lower, right around the average level of happiness. So what this did was it gave a big boost of happiness for a period of time, and then it kind of normalized again. And so it's important to understand that sometimes the long-term pay commitments we make don't necessarily result in permanent happiness levels being increased. But again, to Jennifer's point, does it help in other areas as well? And making sure pay is right certainly does. So I'm going to point out a couple of things on this slide just really quickly. Again, I've referenced this just briefly, but one of the reasons, what are the reasons that top employees leave? The number one answer, according to this Ceridian survey, was non-competitive salaries. If competitive salaries don't exist, your top performers know who they are and they have a feel for what they can make in the marketplace. If they know they're a top performer, then it's especially critical to watch the pay. Okay. Now, what about every other employee out there? It looks like some of my numbers aren't showing up on this particular slide, so I'm not able to see those. Hopefully, you're able to see these over here. But the number for all of your other employees who are good employees and valued employees, maybe not top performers, the number one reason those employees stay in their position is because of their pay is competitive. So whether you're looking at your top performers and retaining them or retaining your average performers, those average performers are vital as well. Pay plays a major role. So our recommendation is that you be intentional with your pay. What we're seeing right now is that organizations are feeling this tightening of the labor market. And a little bit as the labor market tightens, individuals are beginning to be paid more money. And businesses are still able to survive, according to some of the latest research and accounts, by giving their employees a little bit of an increase and watching the budget in other areas. So keep your eye open for different ways to play with those to play with those numbers and get those numbers right for those employees. That'll be important. So we talked about collecting data to be able to make decisions. And again, if you feel like the pay is too low and the leadership, other leaders feel like it's just fine, gathering data is going to help you to bridge that gap. Our experience is that HR, being closer to these issues, has a better pulse, has a better read on the pulse of the organization. And so we encourage you to trust your gut. Salary surveys are a great way to get that data. Now, there are websites that exist that you can go to, and on these websites you can put in someone's information and say, what should an MA be making, what should an NP be making in this area, and it will give you some estimates. I want to warn you against those sites just a little bit. Sometimes that's the only data that you can come up with, so you use what you got. But all of that data is self-reported data. That means you've got a nurse who went in there one evening and said, hey, I'm a nurse. I want to see what other nurses make. I happen to make $450,000 a year at my 5-person clinic, right? We know those numbers don't add up. So it's data like that that can really skew the results of those online or crowd-sourced sources. One other option, a step above that, is the single source, right? So we can go and we can get a salary survey from an organization. Those are helpful as well, right? That gives you some more reliable data that is reported by an HR professional. The only issue with that is that oftentimes that data is not statistically significant. There aren't enough respondents to it so that you can make predictable decisions about pay, which is why we really recommend that when organizations want to get pay right, they use multiple data sources. And multiple data sources gives you a lot more information, and because of technology today, that can become a lot easier, a lot simpler to get that data even without participating in salary surveys. Okay? I'm going to talk with you about a couple of key concepts, a couple of key terms that are going to be helpful as you go on to have conversations with your leadership about pay. One of those concepts is that of a compa ratio. You may not be familiar with this term, but you're certainly going to understand kind of the gist of it really quickly. A compa ratio just tells you where in the salary grade someone's pay falls. Okay, so Emily over there, she's an MA, maybe a phlebotomist. I don't know. I've never really met Emily. Now that I think about it, so that's what happens when we go extemporaneous off of
exactly
extemporaneous speaking, right? So I am going to point out that, and Kathy, thanks for pointing that out. CHAMPS does a regional salary survey every 2 years and makes salary data available to all CHAMPS members. And so we would recommend that you get a hold of that data and use that as part of your solution, right? So Kathy, thanks for pointing that out. So back to the compa ratio, back to Emily, our phlebotomist. She makes $31,500 a year. Her midpoint for her salary range is $35,000. That gives her a compa ratio of 90%. Now, the compa ratio is a really powerful number because the compa ratio, if you look down a list of compa ratios, in 1 second, you're going to know exactly where your problem spots are. So if somebody has too low of a compa ratio, you just have to know that they're at risk of leaving, right? They're going to know that they're a little bit underpaid and they can go make a little bit more money down the road. That's especially important for cash-sensitive positions. Okay, on the flip side of that, you may have somebody who has a really high compa ratio, right? A really high compa ratio, and all of a sudden, you're spending more money than you need to. Maybe that other money could go to other employees to bring their compa ratios up. So you want to find a sweet spot when it comes to compensation, okay? And compa ratios help you to do that. I'm going to skip over this example just for time's sake. And I'm going to skip over this one as well because what I really want to do is I want to talk with you about the competitive salary. Most organizations, at the end of the year, they have an annual review, okay, an annual review, and then they're going to give some sort of an increase after that annual review. What happens when you start with a non-competitive salary, though, and then you add a 3% increase to it from the performance review that's done. You end up actually with another non-competitive salary. Okay, and the reason for that is because the market has changed, and unless you start with really accurate salary ranges, it kind of nullifies the process that you go through in order to get competitive pay from your performance management process. So want to point that out, that it's important to start with the pay. And again, there's technology that's facilitating that. Reach out to us, and we're happy to kind of walk you through some options. There we go. Non-competitive salaries basically negate the efforts of performance management. All right. So just to wrap things up, in this section we talked about a couple of things. We talked about why are your top performers leaving. I would recommend that you really think hard about Jennifer's recommendation to gather data and to gather that data within the format of your exit interviews. That's going to be a great place to start to understand why your top performers are leaving and if compensation is one of those reasons. Then create your own compensation strategy. So figure out where you want to pay your employees and where you'll get your data from, what you want your comp ratios to look like, and identify the right partners and tools to effectively drive your strategy. So grab a hold of that CHAMPS salary survey. Find other salary surveys. Make sure that you kind of have a good pulse on your comp ratios. Those are the types of things that will help you to make better decisions about your pay and be able to have those sticky employees, because compensation will always come back to sticky employees. How do you keep your employees, right? How do you attract them? How do you retain them? And those are the two big things. Those are the two big issues that are going to need to be solved by every organization over the next, until about 2030, somewhere in there when the population changes. Well, okay, so you saw us back in the day, and here we are again, and there we are. So the reason that we have, the last thing that we want to put up there is that every quarter we give some things away to people who join us on some of these presentations. One of the things that may be beneficial to you is to have some free soft skill training at your organization. And Jennifer's actually the one who comes out and does some of that training. Jennifer, how are your soft skills?
They're pretty soft.
Oh, that's great. Pretty soft. Very soft on a scale of 1 to 10. So if that would be beneficial for your organization, that is something that we just give away, and we send Jennifer out there once to a different location once a quarter and to do that. Some organizations, though, for as much as they want to hear from Jennifer, the real value benefit for them is to have some of their grades, some of their positions graded out. Right? They want to know if their positions are in fact competitive or if they're not. And so in those instances, some of those individuals will opt to have us grade out 10 of those positions. We use credible salary survey data to do that, and we do it with our CompEase application. So if you would like to be entered into that quarterly drawing, just reach out to us. Send us an email at hello@hrperformancesolutions.net or connect with Jennifer or I via LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to get that done for you. So we want to thank you for joining us today and letting us spend a few minutes with you. We hope that some of the things we shared are beneficial and that maybe there's one or two things that you can apply that will really help your organization and to thrive in a different way.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Kathy,
both.
over to you.
Jennifer, that was a lot of material you crammed into that presentation.
Yeah, we hope it wasn't too much. We figured you guys can handle it. You're brilliant.
Well, unfortunately, that cut short our time for Q&A, but please fill out the evaluations, and there is a portion in the evaluation where you can submit questions, and we will be sharing those with Isaac and Jennifer, and we can get responses back to you. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Take care.